What is universal or accessible design for interior designers and architects? If you've ever heard that saying that a significant proportion of the world's population will at some stage of their life experience some form of disability, then you will know that this is something that is not going away. It is actually going to become more and more important as an interior designer or an architect moving forward. And injury, I suppose, whether it's something we experience through injury, through an aging population, even just reduced mobility throughout life. This is, or even just inclusivity. This is something that we are becoming more aware of as designers, but also something that is becoming legislation in a lot of areas. So what is it? What is universal and accessible design? Well, it is simply designing for everyone, including everyone into our design. So not just very able-bodied people who could easily, run up 10 flights of stairs. I don't know anyone who could do that anyway, besides a fireman or firewoman or fireperson. It's important to kind of understand that buildings are for everyone, not just for a specific type of person. And that is what this idea is about. So that we're designing for all ages, all abilities, and making spaces more practical and functional for all of our life. So from a baby to a child, to a teenager, to an adult, to an elderly person, and all the way throughout our life. So how we deal and interact with buildings from every stage of our life is something that we're now thinking about, which in the past, that wasn't really part of the design process. Unless you were designing for very specific, like for example, if you were designing for a preschool or what we call nurseries over here. So if you were designing for, little people, then you obviously would be thinking about the heights of things. So just very practical elements. Again, if you're designing for wheelchair users, well, obviously step-free access would be something that you would really would be obvious. But what are some things that are less obvious that we will now start needing to include into our designs? Things like the widths of doors. And if this isn't legislation already that you've come across, but widths of doors, widths of widths of hallways, widths of doors, things like contrast between floor and wall, between a light switch and the wall, or something so that somebody with poor eyesight could see where things are positioned, so that if there is a step and someone has poor visibility, that there is a distinction between the edge of the step and the floor above or floor below. Things like that. Things like door handles, how high you place those door handles. It's funny because in the house that we've moved into here, my daughter cannot touch any of the door handles, which is crazy because she's really tall, even for a 3-year-old. So she cannot open any of our doors because they're literally up here, which is wild. I think that was a 1960s transformation. But things like plug sockets. You'll see now in new builds, you might have come across this already in new builds we're raising the height of sockets. We have been now for quite a few years, but raising the heights of sockets so that these people in perhaps a wheelchair or the elderly who cannot reach quite low are able to use sockets quite easily without obviously having to get onto the ground where they might find it difficult to get back up again. So really practical things, and if you haven't experienced them already, they are becoming more and more part of legislation. Things like smart home. This is an interesting one because this is not usually something we're taught at design school, but it is something we would be taught with continuing professional development, continuing education as designers just by doing our job. But I think it's something that is probably only seen as techie, but it's not. It is actually something that is very, very relevant across and moving forward. So, for example, that could be just a sensor light on the staircase, if you have a staircase, at night, or even, you know, a sensor light coming on at night. So that you don't leave the light on all night for kids or something, or you know, a door to make a door open easier, because if you've ever tried to open a double, you know, a very large open folding sliding door, they are actually, or they can be very, very difficult to open. And that is even for able-bodied people, let alone, you know, if you are, if you do have some kind of ability or disability. So technology is a big one, and one that I think gets overlooked, but technology actually can make life so much easier, and can be one of the ways that we make a space more inclusive. And obviously the obvious one is step-free access. You know, I live in a in a 5-story property. Well, our house has 5 stories. We're in the centre of London, and we've got 4 flights of stairs. So this is, you know, it's not something that is an easy transition for, you know, if you're designing. But these are the things that we have to start thinking about. This is these are the buildings we're refurbishing. It's a lot easier, and you must think of these things when you are building new. But this is now something that we will be asked more and more and more of as designers and architects. So why is it important to know these things? Well, obviously a lot of people haven't been taught this, because with legislation coming in, it is a bit slower. Obviously, we've been aware of very obvious access issues into buildings for a long time, and trying to make even something as, you know, straightforward as wheelchair accessibility as fair as possible, so that, for example, a wheelchair user doesn't have to go around the back of the building to enter the building. They should be able to enter the building in the same way that everyone else does. Or you know, someone like a child being able to use a basin in a bathroom, something I've now, obviously with a 3-year-old, come across quite often, where my child can never wash her hands in a public restroom because there just aren't any children height basins, which makes me think, well, if I know that there are different basins for different for accessible bathrooms, but is that the only place where they can, you know, where we have that height bathroom, that height basin? So obviously you come across it more in commercial buildings, but it's worthwhile considering this now as a design ethos, as standard in all of the designs that we include. So you are going to be asked for more and more of this, so that is why this is important to know. And this is not only for people with disabilities or for inclusivity, it is for everybody, for every stage of our life. And I think that's important to know, especially now we do have an aging population, and we will start being requested more and more of this from our clients. And I already have been. I've designed a lot of, actually that was one of the things that really started to build my business at the beginning. I obviously had e-design where I was doing a lot of interiors, but on the architectural side, I was doing a lot of accessible design, because that is where the need was, and people saw that I had the skills to be able to provide that service. But this is a service I believe that every interior designer and every architect should be able to provide. So I suppose, where do you find this information? Well, that is really key, obviously. If you haven't been taught accessible design, the information is out there. Every single location, so every single country will have its own kind of disability body that where you can start to access that information. Obviously, the Architects Registration Board in every country will have information about this for continued professional development. But you've also got very famous ones, I suppose, the Global Universal Design Commission. You've got designforall.org in Europe, and then there's one in Canada called the Rick Hansen Association. So there are some that are already well known. In the US, I think it's in New York, there's this, the Aging in Place. I think it's a certification you can also get. So these are well-known places where you can get this information, but it is something you have to search out yourself. Also, obviously, if you're part of a interior design community, obviously we provide an interior design community and mentorship, so we can help you learn this information and get this information up and be up to speed with this information. But also, if you are part of an interior design body, so like the British Institute of Interior Design, they will usually provide, or if you ask them to provide, they'll provide resources on this topic. But usually it's the Architects Registration Board in your country that would be the first port of call if there isn't already a disability organisation that has been created. And this information should be free for you. So it's not something that you need to pay a lot of money for. You can, if you want to get certified or licensed in a specific area. But this is free information for you. This is not something that you should be, paying thousands and thousands for, because it's something that should be general knowledge for every single designer. So let me know, are you being asked for more accessible design in your work, and how is this impacting your work as a designer?